Imagine a couple. Let's call them John and Sarah. They both work in corporate offices. They both pull in exactly $100,000 a year. And on paper, they are the definition of the American success story. They have the 4-bedroom house, the 2 SUVs in the driveway, and the kids are in a great daycare. They feel secure because they have 2 incomes. If one person hits a bump, the other is there to catch them, right? That is the logic most of us use. But here is the cold, hard reality. John and Sarah are actually in more financial danger than a single-income family from the 1970s who made half as much money. By combining their incomes to qualify for their lifestyle, they have not created a safety net. They have built a trap. They have effectively doubled their chances of a total household collapse while simultaneously removing their only backup plan. Today, we are going to look at the math of why a $200,000 household is often just one bad Tuesday away from a foreclosure notice, and how the very thing that makes you feel rich is actually making you vulnerable. Before we dive into the probability of failure, I want to make sure you are in the right mindset for this. Most financial advice tells you that more money equals more safety. I'm here to argue that without the right structure, more money just means a higher fall. If you find this kind of deep dive into the mechanics of wealth useful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It is the best return on investment for your time today, keeping you informed so you do not fall into these traps. Now, back to the 2-income illusion. We have been told for 40 years that the rise of the dual-income household was a pure economic win. And in terms of GDP, sure, it looks great. But at the kitchen table level, something shifted. We stopped using the second income as a bonus and started using it as a requirement. When 2 people are required to work just to pay the mortgage, you no longer have a partner who can step in during an emergency because they are already deployed on the front lines. You have maximum exposure and 0 reserves. Let's break down exactly how the math of that exposure works against you. Let us look at the 1970s single-earner model. I know, it feels like ancient history, but the economics are fascinating. In 1975, if the primary earner lost their job, the family had a massive untapped asset: the stay-at-home partner. That partner could immediately go out and find a job. Maybe it was not a high-paying executive role right away, but it was fresh cash flow that did not exist before. That was the original insurance policy. Fast forward to our $200,000 couple today. Both John and Sarah are already working 40 to 50 hours a week. There is no hidden labor in the house. There is no one to send into the job market to bridge the gap if one of them gets a pink slip. They have already maxed out their human capital. When you are both fully deployed, you have essentially sold your insurance policy to pay for a bigger house. You are running your engine at redline just to maintain the baseline, which leaves no room for error when the road gets bumpy. Most people think that having 2 jobs in a house means you have half the risk of a single-income family. It sounds logical. If one person loses a job, you still have the other one. But that is only true if you can live on just one of those incomes. If your lifestyle requires both, the math actually flips. Think about it this way. If there is a 10% chance of a layoff at any given company, a single-income household has a 10% risk. But in a dual-income household, where both incomes are necessary, the risk is not 10%. It is the probability that either person gets laid off. Mathematically, you calculate this by looking at the chance that neither gets fired, which is 0.9 times 0.9, or 81%. That leaves a 19% chance that at least one of you will lose your income. By having 2 earners, you have nearly doubled the statistical likelihood that your household will experience a major income shock. You are not twice as safe. You are twice as likely to be dealing with an unemployment claim at any given moment. This is the part the bank never mentions when they are looking at your joint application. When that 19% probability eventually hits, It creates a unique kind of carnage for high earners. If Sarah gets laid off, the household income does not just drop, it is cut by exactly 50%. However, and this is the crucial part, their fixed costs stay at 100%. The mortgage lender does not care that Sarah is currently polishing her resume. They want the full $5,000 on the first of the month. The car loan companies do not offer a 50% discount because your income took a hit. In a single income household of the past, if the earner kept their job, the budget stayed stable. If they lost it, the crisis was total, but the stay-at-home spouse could potentially offset a significant chunk of the loss because their costs were lower to begin with. In the modern version, you are losing half your revenue, while your expenses remain locked at a level that required every penny of your previous peak earnings. It is a mathematical pincer move that leaves you with no room to breathe and no time to pivot. There is also a hidden time factor here. If you are making $100,000 a year, you are likely in a specialized or managerial role. You cannot just walk across the street and find an identical job by Monday morning. Statistics show that the higher your salary, the longer your job search typically takes. We are talking months, not weeks. While Sarah is spending 3 to 6 months searching for a role that pays what she is worth, the household is bleeding cash every single day. If you were a single income family making $50,000, you could potentially replace that income with 2 part-time jobs in a pinch. But you cannot replace a 6-figure executive salary with a few shifts at a retail store. The stakes are higher, the roles are rarer, and the timeline to recovery is longer. You have built a life that requires a very specific, high-octane fuel, and if the pump runs dry for even a quarter, the whole machine seizes up. And wait until you see how the budget actually evaporates before you even buy a single luxury. If you think this is just about being irresponsible with money, you are in for a shock. Most people assume that couples who go broke on $200,000 a year are spending it all on designer bags and first-class flights. But the data shows something much more terrifying. These families are going broke on things that feel like necessities. They are going broke on the basics. We are going to look at the anatomy of a $200,000 budget, and you will see that by the time they pay for the things society tells them they need, they are actually poorer than people making half as much. If you have ever felt like you are making a lot of money but still have nothing left at the end of the month, the next few minutes are going to explain exactly why that is happening. It is not your spending, it is the structure of your life. Let us look at John and Sarah again. 200,000 gross. That sounds like a lot, right? In many parts of the country, that puts you in the top 10% of earners. But after Uncle Sam takes his cut, that number starts to shrink fast. Once you account for federal and state taxes, Social Security and Medicare, that $16,000 a month is already down to about $12,000. Then you add in healthcare premiums for a family and a modest contribution to their 401k because they are responsible people. Now they are looking at about $10,500 in actual take-home pay. That is the real number they have to work with. But because they see that $200,000 figure on their tax returns, they feel like they have a $10,000 a month safety margin. They don't. They have $10,000 to cover everything, and they have already committed most of it to someone else. This is where the bidding war for the middle class begins to eat their future, starting with the very roof over their heads. When John and Sarah went to the bank, the lender looked at their combined $200,000 and said, "Congratulations, you qualify for a $750,000 home." And because they wanted a safe neighborhood and a good school district, that is exactly what they bought. Their mortgage, with property taxes and insurance, is now $5,200 a month. Think about that for a second. More than half of their take-home pay is gone before they even turn on the lights or buy a loaf of bread. The bank is happy because they have two incomes to garnish if things go south. But the couple is now tethered to those two jobs for the next 30 years. They did not buy a home, they bought a 30-year obligation to never, ever have a bad day at work. This is the central pillar of the two-income trap. The housing market has essentially absorbed the second income. Instead of that second salary making the family richer, it simply allowed them to bid more for a house in a competitive market. They are working twice as hard just to live in the same kind of neighbourhood their parents lived in on one salary. Now we add the costs that only exist because they both work. First up is childcare. For two kids in a quality centre, they are looking at $3,000 a month. That is not a luxury, it is the price of admission for Sarah to go to work. Then we have the two commutes. That means two reliable cars, two insurance policies, and double the gas and maintenance. That is another $1,200. By the time they pay for their student loans and basic utilities, their fixed costs are sitting at nearly $12,000. Wait a minute, their take-home pay was only $10,500. They are already $1,500 in the red every month just by existing. To bridge that gap, they stop saving for retirement. They stop the 401k contributions and maybe even put the groceries on a credit card. They are high earners, but they are living a life they cannot actually afford, all because they scaled their fixed costs to their absolute maximum possible income. They are not living large, they are just living at the limit of their combined capacity. If either one of them stops, the whole house of cards collapses instantly. This is what a financial emergency looks like for a $200,000 couple. If Sarah gets laid off, their income drops to $5,250. Their mortgage alone is $5,200. They have $50 left to feed 4 people, pay the electric bill, and keep the cars running. They are in a state of total crisis within 30 days. They cannot even pull the kids out of daycare to save money, because if Sarah is going to find a new job, she needs someone to watch the kids while she interviews. Plus, most daycare centres have months-long wait lists. If they give up their spot, Sarah might not be able to go back to work when she finally does find a job. They are trapped by the very systems designed to support their dual-income lifestyle. This is why the two-income trap is so much more dangerous than a single-income struggle. There is no flexibility. There is no room to downshift. You are either at full speed or you are crashing. And the worst part? It is often the school system that forced you into this. You might be wondering why anyone would be so reckless. Why not just live in a cheaper house? Well, it turns out it is not just about ego or keeping up with the Joneses. There is a deep, systemic reason why middle-class families feel forced to bid their entire second income into the housing market. It has to do with the one thing every parent is terrified of: a bad school. In a few minutes, I am going to show you how the housing market effectively tax farms the second income of every American family, and how that creates a cycle that is almost impossible to break without a radical change in strategy. But first, let's talk about what you can actually do to protect yourself, because you can win this game if you know the rules. If you are enjoying this deep dive into the real mechanics of money, you should consider becoming one of the optimizers. Just click the Join button below this video. Our members get priority replies to their comments, which is where we do a lot of our collective peer review on these strategies. And you get some cool custom sketch badges next to your name. It is a way to support the channel and join a group of people who are committed to building real financial resilience in a world that is designed to keep you on the edge. Now, let's get into the solutions, because understanding the trap is only half the battle. You need an escape plan. The single most effective way to disarm the two-income trap is to change how you buy a home. Forget what the bank tells you that you can afford. They are in the business of selling debt, not protecting your family. You need to follow the 1.5 income rule. This means you should base your fixed housing costs solely on the income of the highest earner, plus maybe half of the second earner at most. Ideally, you buy a house that you could comfortably afford if you were living on just one of your salaries. If partner A makes $110,000 and partner B makes $90,000, you find a house that fits an income of $110,000. This creates an immediate, permanent safety net. If partner B loses their job, the mortgage is never in question. It might mean you have a smaller house, or you live in a slightly less prestigious zip code. But what you are buying is not just square footage. You are buying the ability to sleep at night. You are buying the freedom to tell a bad boss to take a hike without fearing homelessness. Standard financial advice says you need 3 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund. For a dual-income family with high fixed costs, that is dangerously low. Because your risk is doubled and your job search timeline is longer, you need a 6 to 12-month emergency fund sitting in a high-yield savings account. I call this the supercharged emergency fund. It needs to be enough to cover 100% of your lifestyle, even if your income drops by 50%. Think of it as your own personal insurance company. Having $50,000 or $60,000 in cash might feel like a waste when you could be investing it in the market. But in the context of the two-income trap, that cash is the only thing that gives you a runway. It turns a potential life-shattering catastrophe into a stressful but manageable inconvenience. It gives you the power to wait for the right job offer instead of being forced to take the first thing that comes along because the mortgage is due. The next step is to decouple your identity from your gross income. There is a term for people who make a lot but have nothing left. Henrys. High earners, not rich yet. Most $200,000 couples are Henrys because they have allowed their lifestyle to creep up alongside every raise. To escape the trap, you have to live like a household making much less. If you make $200,000, try to live like you make $120,000. Drive the reliable used cars. Skip the designer furniture. This does not mean living in poverty, it means being intentional. By keeping your variable expenses low, you increase the margin between what you make and what you must spend. That margin is where true wealth is built. It is also where your security lives. The smaller the gap between your income and your expenses, the tighter the noose around your neck. The goal is to make your second income an engine for wealth creation, not a vital life support system. Finally, you need to perform an annual fire drill. Sit down with your partner and a simple spreadsheet once a year. Ask the hard question. What do we do if Sarah gets fired on Tuesday? Don't just give vague answers. List the specific actions. Which subscriptions get cancelled in the first hour? Can we sell one of the cars? How many months exactly can we survive on just John's salary plus the savings? By having this conversation when things are calm, you remove the panic from the equation. You create a rational, pre-approved plan for an emergency. This also highlights where your vulnerabilities are. If you realize during the fire drill that you would be out of money in 3 weeks, that is your signal to stop spending and start saving. Financial security is not a destination, it is a defensive posture. It is about the margin. When you have margin, you have options. When you have options, you have freedom. Making $200,000 together is a massive opportunity, but only if you refuse to let the world use that money as leverage against you. Disarm the trap, build your margin, and take control of your future. We have covered a lot of ground today, from the probability of a layoff to the structural bidding wars of the housing market. But I want to hear from you. Have you felt the squeeze of the two-income trap? Or have you found a different way to build a safety net that I did not mention here? I look at the comments as a kind of peer review for these ideas, so leave your thoughts below. It helps everyone else in the community learn from real-world data. If you found this helpful, give the video a like and share it with someone who might be living on that $200,000 edge. The more we talk about the reality of these numbers, the harder it is for the trap to spring shut on us. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one to keep talking money. I am Tom, and let's keep building that margin.